Today we are going to be learning about paint mixing, and specifically we'll be learning about tints and shades. Tint is when you add white to a color, and a shade is when you add black to a color. Today we're going to be first making a grayscale, and then we'll be making a tint and shade scale with one color, maybe two colors if we get that far. You can see this is a finished tint and shade grayscale, and this is a tint and shade with the pure color being green. You can see here I started with white and added a little bit of black to the next one to make a darker or very light shade of gray, and then I added a little more black, a little more until I got to my gray here in the middle. Then I added a little more black, all the way to black. And I will demonstrate this so you can see how it's done. Same thing here, I started with my white and pure color, and I added a little bit of green into my white to get a light tint of green, and I added a little more green to get a darker tint of green, the darkest tint, and then pure green, and then a little black into my green, a little black to make another darker shade of green, darkest shade of green, and then total black. Okay, so what you're going to start with is a color mixing chart that says color mixing monochromatic value. You're going to put your name so we know who to give it back to next week, Mr. Lundgren. Of course, you are going to write your name there. And then write your teacher's name. Let's pretend this is Miss Schmidt's class. Okay, and write her name right there so we know which class it belongs to, just in case it should get lost. And then you're going to need these supplies. You're going to need a palette paper and a palette. You'll need a paper towel to blot your brush on. If and when you wash your brush out, you'll need 1 cup of clean water and 1 empty little mixing cup. You're going to just dump a little bit of clean water in there. Okay, and then you'll need an empty cup to dump your dirty water into when you're done. Okay, first things first, you're going to have all your supplies sitting out. If you're right-handed, have your mixing plate on one side here and maybe your water cup on the right-hand side. However, I don't have quite enough room for that. So you're going to take a little white paint and put it on one side of your palette, and take just a teeny bit of black paint and put it on the other side of your palette. So you've got a nice space in between. Okay, then you're going to start right here on this first line. You're going to start, I'm not even going to get my paintbrush wet, I'm just going to get some white paint on the end of my paintbrush. Remember, for good brush form, you're always going to hold your paintbrush like it's a pencil right behind the metal part, the ferrule. You're going to come over here and you're going to paint white right into the square that says white. Make sure you pull your brush and do the best job you can to stay inside the square so it looks something like that. Next, you're just going to take a little pinprick of black, okay, like about that much, and you're going to grab a bunch of white paint and put it on top and mix it together. Okay, you can see that it just changed it a bit. Notice how I'm fully mixing all of the paint. I'm not leaving it shmeary and unmixed. I'm mixing the whole thing. I'm going to come over here and add this right onto where it says tint 4. This is my lightest shade of gray. You can see the difference, just a little difference. You don't want the difference to be too big. You just want a little bit. There's another little thing, and I'm going to add some more white into it so it is there's enough paint to work with. You should have a lot of paint. Remember, I haven't even touched the water cup yet. You want to have mostly paint. You don't want to have it so much so that you've got a wet paintbrush all the time. This isn't watercolor, it's tempera paint. Okay, so if you look at that now, you can see a little bit of difference between each of those. I'm going to keep going here. Oops, that's a lot of black. Whoops. So if you add a lot of black, take a lot of white, and mix it back together so you don't get so dark of a tint there. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more white here. Okay. So that's pretty well mixed up, nice and even. There's no big smears or lines in it. Here's my next tint. It's a little darker, as you can see. Okay. And add a little teeny pinprick of black in here. Okay, and as you can see this time, I'm going to take it just a little bit more and depending on how it looks, I won't even add any white into it because I think that it's kind of beyond the stage of adding white in. Need just a hair more, just a little bit. You can see just a little teeny bit on my brush, just a little bit at a time to make a nice even transfer from one tint or shade to the next. There's a little bit darker. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more gray here, or a little bit more black. And this is the easiest, fastest way to get gray, which is just adding white and black together. Okay, and as you get older, I'll show you different, more interesting ways of making gray. Okay, so there's our gray tone. Okay, and actually, it's a pretty light gray, but that's a nice gray. You can see it gets a little darker each time. You can add a little bit more black in here. Notice, have I washed my brush out yet? Nope, not at all. I haven't washed my brush out. I've just been adding more paint on. Okay, so you don't need to wash your brush until the very end. Okay, so here is the next one. Add a little bit more black in. Notice how I just take a little teeny bit of my black each time. I start with white and make my nice light, just, that's a little bit too light still. I'm going to add a little bit more black. And actually this is very, I could have made my shades a little darker, so I'm going to start going a little darker now, adding a little more black, otherwise it's going to be too much of a contrast by the time we get down to black. There we go. Here's my shade 3. You can see it's much darker, but it's all a nice even value there. It's not smeary or black. Can't see black lines or white lines in it. It's all nice in one value. And I'll do a little example right here at the end to show you what I don't want to see. Okay, so here's my darkest value, okay, of gray, and I'm actually going to add a little bit more black into that, just to, there we go. Now that's going to be a very dark shade. It's going to be a little, well, not too much darker actually. Okay, and now this last one, I'm just going to take my brush without water on it. Just going to kind of get most of the extra paint off on my paper towel there. I'm just going to grab pure black right off the top of my black and put it right here into my black square, so we have a nice clear shade of black there. Okay, so that's what your paper should look like at the end. It should be nice and neat. You can see from this other example that I did, I kind of didn't make the tints so even. I did a little faster, and these ones are pretty much all dark, much darker than these ones. This is what I see from a lot of first and second graders when we do these kind of things. They start with a piece that looks like this, and they take their white and they smear it in here like this, and then they take their black and they smear some black in, and they kind of go like that, and then they put it into the next one, and then they take some more black and they smear it in like this, and they put it into the next one. Then they take some more black like this and smear it in. And then sometimes if they get really lazy and they think Mr. Lundgren's not watching, they just kind of go like this, and then they take their black here at the end, and then they paint that in, and then they're like, okay, Mr. Lundgren, I'm done, can I free draw? And this is totally not what we're looking for, right? This looks like garbage. This looks like, preschool. Okay, what you should have is a nice, neat value change from each square to each square. Each one should be individually painted, nice and neat, with a different value of paint. If I see this, it goes straight in the trash and you start over. So don't waste your time doing something like this. Do a nice, neat job so you have a different change from white to the different tints all the way to gray, and then different shades using your black. Don't do this. Okay? And this is called mixing paint, tints, and shades.